Amazing. All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is one of our pop-up webinars. My name is Martin Pei, and I'm a managing partner for Expert Media Matters, a digital marketing and media agency. We were contacted by a client to host this important interview about the Florida building collapse. Today, we will be interviewing our special guest, national building expert, Lance Luke. Welcome, Mr. Luke.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
Hey, no problem. Um, our format is simple. We will conduct our interview first and then open up the interview for any questions from our audience. Attendees, if you're on our webinar on Zoom, use the chat or Q&A feature if you want to ask questions live, and please use the raise hand icon. So let's begin. Mr. Luke, I know that you were interviewed last week by various news media locally, including affiliates from Fox and ABC News. So please bear with me if some of my questions are redundant. So Lance, what can you say?
Well, what do you want to know? I'm here to answer all your questions, or whoever else has any questions. I know I'm not monitoring Facebook Live, so if people are on live, I'm not going to see their questions.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to monitor on my side, Lance. So let me see if I can see what's going on there. So go ahead.
Okay, so basically, the initial comments I had when I found out about the story was that high-rise building collapsed. So I thought, okay, it's probably a bomb that got set off or a huge earthquake. So initial reports, there was nothing regarding a bomb. So next item I thought was maybe an earthquake. But then, in Florida, earthquakes don't happen that often. They're rare. They get more hurricanes than earthquakes. And the earthquake has to be probably 7.0, 7.5 higher on a Richter scale in order to cause that much damage. So usually if there's a huge earthquake, you wouldn't see one building falling down and the other building standing. So my conclusion was that it wasn't a bomb, it wasn't an earthquake. What was it? And let me tell you that for a high-rise building in the United States to just collapse like that, that's like very, very rare. It doesn't happen a lot. So I'm thinking that my initial thought was discounting the any kind of explosion or an earthquake. My thought would be concrete spalling. Now, there's various factors that are involved in concrete spalling where the rebar is affected and then it cracks the concrete. But I'm not going to discuss that right now unless you have further questions regarding the causes.
Well, I guess you kind of answered the question I had here of what do you think the cause of the collapse was due to? So my next question here is, can you tell us about the current building inspection program in Florida?
Well, let me back up and talk about the causes. There's speculation on the news for the past week that there was roof work going on at the time. There may be bad soil. There could have been a sinkhole. There was a report that there was construction nearby where another high-rise building was being built, and there was ground movement, and maybe sea level rise and those kind of things. So I want to explain that it could be a combination of any one of these factors, but I'm not positive that that's the majority or the number one cause of the problem. Now, the whenever there's an earthquake, and I know there was no earthquake in Florida at the time of the building collapse, but just to explain to the viewers that there's a term called liquefaction, and that occurs when uh, there's an earthquake and the ground settles, and instead of the ground being solid because of the movement from the earthquake, the ground kind of turns into almost like a liquid state. The particles that were really close knit, binded together, now become loose, and now the soil becomes very liquid type, and it's almost like, think of like a sinkhole or like quicksand. There's also a term called soil subsidence, where it could not, maybe not be an earthquake, but the ground moves and all of a sudden the soil moves with it. Uh, and it could be like a landslide or that kind of issue, or maybe the soil is sinking in the ground, sort of like a sinkhole. So those factors, there's also the issue of the marine environment, where you got all these high rises that are located on the coast. And uh, when you talk about sea level rise, the water, the salt water could be rising uh, a lot higher than the sea level when the building was built. So you have that factor. Also, the marine environment, there's a lot of salt in the water and in the air, and salt is very corrosive to reinforced concrete. So the problem with the concrete spalling issue, as I mentioned earlier, has to do with a lot of salt and chlorides in the environment, in the water, in the air, and it's causing the steel to rust. Now, how does it cause steel to rust? Because concrete is not porous. So you have these reinforcing members, reinforcing bars, reinforcing steel, rebar that's embedded in the concrete. And when the concrete is not protected, either by paint, waterproofing, or there's cracks, now you have moisture, salt can get in the cracks. When it hits the rebar starts corroding and expanding. When the rebar expands, it cracks the concrete, and that's spalling. Basically, that's easy definition of spalling. Now, if you have cracks in the concrete due to spalling, and the cracks are bigger, now you have more openings where water or moisture can get in. So it could be a compounded problem. The other situation is that, and my initial thought and my opinion is that the building fell down due to major concrete spalling. And although it's not conclusive because we don't have any results coming back yet as to the cause, I think in the end, that's going to be a contributing factor to the building collapse. Now, there's another issue, which is not necessarily a physical issue, and I call it the human factor issue. Now, what is that? Um, in my opinion, there's a lot of different factors that were involved that involves humans, and you have inspectors going to the property, you have workers, site workers there, you have workers that are contractors that are entering the building, like maybe the pool contractor, and looking at things. You have engineers. There was an engineer hired to do a initial inspection, and he issued a report, which I read. And in my opinion, that report was good, but it could have been better. It could have been more specific. It could have had more follow-up. I think there were statements regarding testing of concrete and all that, but I don't know what happened. Were there testing done? Was there actually results of the tests? That was not conclusive. Also, there was a condominium board that was involved and knew about certain situations, but the board may not acted in a timely fashion, or they tried to. The other human factor is the city building inspectors. Based on the photos that I saw, I think the city building inspector or the building department should have issued a notice of violation. In other words, at the time they looked at the building, they should have immediately caught the telltale signs of spalling and possible building problems and issued a notice to correct. If it's that bad, the engineers should have told the condo board, hey, we have a serious problem here. We got to shut down portions of the building. We have to do this, cordon off, put caution tape, shore up the parking deck, things like that. Now, it's easy to speculate after the fact, but I've been involved in a lot of condo repair and spalling repair, and I'm just basing my statements on my experience. The other issue is that there was talk about not enough money that the condo had. And when I read the report from the previous board president, I think they said they needed about 16 million, 15 million dollars. They had about $800,000 in reserve, but if you use all your reserve money and you look at how much money you need to fix the building, that's huge. In the state of Florida or any state, even Hawaii, where we're from, $15 million to repair a high-rise condo is huge. That equates to major repairs being done, structural repairs and all that. So the fact of the matter is it was a big problem already as far as repairs, but nothing really happened along those lines, either warning people that there could be an imminent problem or taking steps to start the repair work for safety. So I think there was a lot of factors involved that didn't happen that should have happened. Now, the money issue, there's no excuse for not having the money to fix your building. In other words, there's a requirement to fix the building, and there's no exemption, like if you don't have the money, you don't have to fix your building. So in condo law, when there's a board of directors, the condo board has a duty to maintain the property, and that duty is not swayed by any way by lack of funds, or it shouldn't be. So basically, when I realized what happened and knowing my experience in working on condos and buildings and all that, I was pretty sick and devastated, because in my opinion, this accident should never have happened at all, not at all. But certain factors that were fail-safe factors along the way, it just all basically disappeared. There was no protection in every step of the way. It was like a little too late. So that's basically what I think the causes are, and my opinion on condos in general.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Lance. Obviously, it's not a simple cause. There's definitely multiple factors there. Yeah. And it kind of leads up to the question I did ask earlier, as far as the current building inspection program in Florida, because that sounds to be a factor, that how they inspect and maintain. So what can you tell us about that for Florida? And I'm sure you'll probably tell us about that for Hawaii too.
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking. So in the state of Florida, there's what's called a 40-year recertification program. And what that program is all about is that when the building hits the 40-year mark, they're required to get another inspection, which they call a recertification of the building. And the way the program is built is that it's a 40-year recertification. Then after that, it's another inspection every 10 years. But if you ask me, that's too long of a time span, because major building components basically fail or start failing at a time period of, say, 10, 15, 20-year mark. So if building components start failing 10, 15, 20-year, 30-year mark, why are you having a 40-year inspection program? By the 40-year period, your building is basically falling apart or exhibiting signs of failing in certain areas. So, for example, waterproofing of a building in itself would last between 5 to 10 years. Painting, 10 to 15. And painting, by the way, is protecting the concrete, and waterproofing does the same thing. So if buildings aren't repainted or re-waterproof, after the 5-10 year mark, then it's a contributing factor, or could be, to the spalling issue. So very important, these components. Also, your elevator, your cast iron piping, they don't last forever. The lifespan of those components is maybe 30, 35 years, could be 40 years if you stretch it. So your elevator and your cast iron piping would, if there's no inspection until 40 years, those components could be failing, before the 40-year period. Your electrical distribution system and electrical components, useful life is about 35 to 40 years. So you may be stretching it. Also, people need to know that there's no inspection once a building is built, except your yearly elevator and fire alarm systems. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there's years and years of no inspections being done. And the inspections I'm talking about is the city building department inspections. So you got these gaps of 10, 20, 30, 40 years where the city is not coming out to inspect your building. And that time span is way too long. Now, people say, and the city says, the reason why is because there's a self-monitoring inspection program in place. What does that mean? That means that every building owner, whether it's a condo, shopping center, office building, any type of building, apartment building, rental housing, they're saying that the building owner should self-monitor. In other words, that building owner is responsible, and the property management company, to inspect the buildings on their own, or hire inspectors or engineers or somebody to inspect. Does that happen? Yes, it does, but it doesn't happen all the time. I can name a lot of buildings that basically fell apart because the self-monitoring program didn't work. The owner wasn't inspecting and didn't hire anybody. So I don't think, and I don't believe, and I know it costs money, but I don't believe that the self-monitoring system actually works. Okay, so my take is that the whole inspection program should be revamped to maybe at least 20 years. So instead of a 40-year, inspect the buildings, mandatory inspections every 20-year, at the 20-year period, and then follow up with 10-year inspections after that. So basically, the recertification at that 20-year period, if things are following my advice, the recertification is based on looking at building components and their useful life and failure rate, and going back, because it doesn't make sense. I mean, now it's obvious that the 40-year inspection program, does not work, because look at this example. And if it did work, we wouldn't have this building collapse issue, because things would have been identified and taken care of in a timely manner, and we wouldn't have this problem. So I'm thinking that every city, no matter where the building is, should have this program in place, that there'll be mandatory inspections. And of course, in coastal areas like Florida, Hawaii, Texas, areas that are exposed to the ocean, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, that are close to the ocean and get a lot of salt air, those buildings would suffer from the marine environment, and they need to be inspected more frequently than buildings that are inland that don't have the same marine environment and coastal conditions. But it depends on the location. But if there was a mandatory building inspection program in place that would cover buildings in every city, and that's okay if they change the duration from 20 years to 15 or maybe 25 or something. At least there should be a program in place. Now, you mentioned Hawaii. Hawaii and most cities in the United States do not have inspection program at all. It's proactive. It's not proactive. It's reactive. So the building inspector from the city, the building department, doesn't go to the building and inspect it on their own. It has to be somebody calling and saying, oh, I think I see cracks in my building, and I notified the owner and he's not doing anything. So can you come and take a look? And whenever you have a reactive approach, that doesn't really happen for the right reason. Yeah, it's maybe a little too late in that situation. So I would say inspection programs are needed, and I know it's going to take a while. It's going to be political. It's going to be a money issue. There's going to be a lot of building owners, condo associations, property management companies that manage these types of properties saying, we don't have the money to do that. I don't think it's needed, and it costs too much. Okay, but on the other hand, if you interviewed the people that lived in the building that collapsed, I'm sure they would all vote for a mandatory inspection program that's sooner than the 40-year mark. So I guess enough of that.
Okay. Okay, Lance. Yeah, it sounds like an important thing to do. My next question here is getting back to the actual Florida situation. If you can explain what forensic engineering is and how it will be applied in this situation.
Okay. Before I discuss that, I'd like to dovetail on the inspection program. I just thought of something. Every building should have a repair and maintenance program. And it doesn't matter if the building is a 2-story, 10-unit apartment building, or a 40-story or 80-story high-rise building in New York. Okay, the concept is the same. Every building should have a repair and maintenance program. And when I say building, I'm talking about any kind of built structure: shopping center, office building, apartment building, public housing, hospitals, golf courses, you name it. So I think for safety, every building should have a repair and maintenance program. And most buildings do. Okay, but the program has to be followed. So in other words, you don't just go through the motion, check off things. I inspected the walkway, the stairway looks good. If there's any deficiencies, they should be corrected right away, no matter if it's big or small. Okay, and I think that the onus is on every single person that works in the building, is a tenant in the building, even security guards. When security guards make their rounds, if they see a loose railing, they got to report it. And this is all for building safety. We don't want anybody getting hurt or killed because of negligence and not inspecting, not reporting, and all that. So I got a report the other day in Florida. The insurance companies are now requiring all buildings to be inspected within 45 days or else. And what is the or else? The or else is your insurance is going to be canceled, or your premium on an incident is going to be raised to 100,000, 200,000, or something like that. Now, why is that an issue? If the insurance companies think it's a big issue, it is a big issue, because if there's an accident, the first thing you call is the insurance company, right after you call 911. But um, the insurance companies, if it's a problem that's due to negligence, they might not come to the table and fund. There's fine print that says, and I've read a lot of insurance policies where if the failure of a component or the building was caused by a building code violation or negligence on the part of the building owner, then they don't have to pay up. So there's going to be a huge fight whenever there's a building issue and lawsuits, and there's a number of lawsuits already in Florida. The insurance company, of course, is going to throw their hands up and say, I have nothing to do with this, because there was problems. The building wasn't maintained. So even if it's not insurance mandated, I think that goes without saying that the building should be inspected, even if your insurance company doesn't require you to do the inspections. Now, in answer to your forensic question, kind of forgot what the question was. I knew it was forensic, but can you repeat it?
Yeah. And this gets back to the actual Florida situation, and they're going through the recovery and all that kind of stuff. Is what kind of forensic engineering? If you can explain what that is and how it will be applied in this particular case of Florida.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Initially, when there's a building collapse and there's injuries or you can't find people, the first order of business is to search and rescue and find people and save them. So search and rescue is the first order of business, and then after a while it turns into a search and recover, because it's every day the hope is getting less and less, because people can't stay under the rubble and still be alive. But unfortunately, the forensic engineering can't take place until the search and rescue and search and recovery stage happened already. It doesn't make sense for a rescue person to be trying to find somebody and rescue them, and somebody next door to them is right next to them is gathering pieces of concrete for testing and evaluation. So the problem we have in Florida is that the report I got, it was a 12-story building, and about maybe 6 stories were it's actually underground when the building collapsed. So the true evidence and the evidence that's really needed is actually underground. The investigators haven't even gotten to that point yet. Okay, so this is how forensic engineering work. It's basically information gathering, and you go just like a construction defect litigation case. It's information gathering. We would look at the original building plans and take a look at the as-built construction. As-built means the construction as it sits, today. Unfortunately, there's really no building left because they demolished the other portion of the building, but from photographs and other information. So as best as possible. So basically, you're taking the building plans, you're reviewing the building plans that were created at the time the building was built, and looking at the construction and matching it. So in other words, did the building get built following the design plans, design specifications? And the comparison is very important. The gathering of physical evidence, such as rebar, reinforcing steel, concrete, and reviewing the rebar size, the count, the placement, so you can have one column or one beam. According to the plans, how many pieces of rebar are in that section, what the size of the rebar was, and all that, and then the concrete placement, the coverage of the concrete. Also, taking samples of the concrete to test it. And why do you test the concrete? Well, we would determine the concrete mix, the aggregate size, how much aggregate is in a section of concrete. There's compression, strength tests done. We look at, take a sample of concrete and examine it in a laboratory for the salt content, the chloride content, and all that to determine what was happening over time. And at the time of the collapse, was the concrete really solid as specified, or was it damaged, or, over time by salt in the air or water or those kind of things. Now, there's going to be a review of thousands and thousands of photos and videos and interview with hundreds, maybe thousands of witnesses. So all that is part of the forensic discovery phase. And it's going to take years. It's going to take probably a couple of years to reach a conclusion as to what was the cause. And there may not be one specific cause. There may be, as I mentioned before, in order of percentages of the contributing factors of the collapse. So, I would say spalling problems is one, and then soil condition two, and so forth and so on. Now, I don't think it was reported in the news. I haven't seen anything, but the hazmat issue, which is hazardous materials, is another important factor, because a building that age, the building is about 40 years old. Buildings, built in the late 70s and early 80s, but more so in the 60s and 70s, contain asbestos, lead paint, and in the concrete, there's what's called a crystalline silica particle. So it's in the concrete and the concrete dust. So if somebody breathes the silica, that's hazardous. And even if there was no asbestos or lead paint, just the fact that when a building collapses that's made out of reinforced concrete has that concrete dust, that's hazardous and not good to breathe. That's why if you see photos or videos of rescue workers and other construction people on the job site, they're wearing full PPE with these masks and everything for their own protection. That's required by OSHA standards anyway. So it's not an easy task, and the engineering portion is going to be key, especially because of all the numerous lawsuits. I've run across a bunch already where everybody's suing for everything, and when there's a lawsuit, the legal strategy is you just name every single entity or person that had anything to do, or you think had anything to do with the problem. And as the lawsuit goes on, you see, identify what people are really involved or not. And so that's the idea. There's even talks about a class action lawsuit, but it's just a bad situation what we have.
Mm. Okay, Lance, thank you so much. I get probably something that everybody locally and everywhere thinking about right now, our viewers, and we all want to be safe in our buildings. So what recommendations can you give us on building safety?
Well, the key issue is you cannot go on business as usual. This building collapse is a huge wake-up call for the construction industry, building industry, the property management industry, to now look back and review what protocols are in place for building safety. And the protocols that are in place should be, first and foremost, a building inspection program, as well as a repair and maintenance program. Those two programs go together. And I'm not talking about going to the respective cities of each area and asking them what the program should be, although they can be helpful. I'm talking about the private entities forming their own inspection and repair and maintenance program and sticking to it. And when there's problems that are identified, it has to be fixed right away, because one small crack in a building, in a concrete building, we don't know what that crack's all about. Is it like a settlement crack, or is it a result of spalling? And briefly, the spalling issue, if you look at an iceberg and you got a tip of the iceberg, and then you got this underneath the water, you got the huge area of the iceberg. That's sort of like how spalling is. If you see one small crack and it's due to spalling, that issue could be a 3-foot crack with corroded rebar in it, and a piece of concrete is ready to fall off, but you can't see it. And that's why concrete spalling conditions are dangerous, and a lot of times it's hard to figure out, and it's hard to see. You can't go look at a building and if there's no obvious signs of spalling, saying, oh, there's spalling here, there, and along all these areas. So if you do see spalling conditions, corroded rebar, that's already major. That's like beyond the pass of you should have been taken care of right away kind of thing. So that's why I always say take care of these spalling issues right away. And it's not only spalling, it's roofing. You don't want a roof leak, electrical, plumbing. So the thing is that water is probably the number one cause of building problems. Roof leak, or you have leaky windows, water getting in. All of a sudden now you got mold in your drywall. Your drywall's coming apart. You got more hazards than just the water coming in, because if that drywall where your window is has asbestos in it and lead paint, now you got mold, you got an asbestos problem, you got lead paint issue. So it could be a domino effect, which is compounding the problem. So water on your roof, you don't want water leaking from a roof leak or flashing details. That's not good. Water infiltration at windows. A lot of new buildings today, they have a window wall system. And if it's not caulked properly or installed correctly, you got water coming in at your window frames or your window system. You might have air coming in. You could have old cast iron piping. And when that leaks, that's wastewater. If you're in a 23-story building and your top floor leaks and the water goes all the way down to the ground floor, now you got all these units in the building contaminated. That's a hazmat issue. So for building safety, I would recommend inspections, repair and maintenance program, hire experts if you can't do it yourself. And if you're on a condo board or property manager, you're not considered an expert engineer or inspector. So don't be afraid to hire a third party that can help you. I know it costs money, but money shouldn't be the issue if you want to protect your building and have everybody safe.
Very good, Lance. Thank you so much. I was going to open it up to questions, but before I do, I just kind of wanted to comment. I'd read a press release where you wrote a book on building safety, like you just mentioned, and also you give webinars, yeah? So can you tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing in those areas?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of years ago, I wrote a book with Larry King, who recently passed away, but there's a chapter I wrote called "Is Your Building Safe?" and it was about building safety. And the title of that book actually is The Big Question, and it's actually apropos today because I asked the big question to all building owners and property managers: is your building safe? That's the question. And what is of course everyone says yes, but when you stop and take a step back and think about it, why are you saying yes? Do you have information to back that up? And what information would that be? Well, have you inspected your building within the past year or two? What is your repair and maintenance program? Is there any outstanding items on the list that you haven't fixed yet? And in the chapter, I talk about loose railings, improper stairs, electrical, roofing. There's a section on concrete spalling, which is always top of mind, and especially with this Florida collapse, it's more top of mind as far as I'm concerned. And actually, the book or that chapter on building safety is available free, as well as our webinars. We give building and construction webinars that are very informative, informational. They're free, and the website to go to is askbuildingexpert.now.site, and you can register for upcoming webinars. You can watch the video replay on demand. There's a whole bunch of webinars up there that will be very informative, I think. And the other thing is you sign up for future ones, and I'm revamping the schedule now because of this building collapse. I'm going to do more webinars along those lines: building safety, condo safety, fire and life safety, and those kind of things. So the book is available also at the same website, askbuildingexpert.now.site/publications. So I like to help impart knowledge in the industry and help as many people as I can. That's the reason why the chapter in the book is free and the webinars are free. And also, there's my contact information. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to help and give them answers.
Okay, Lance, thank you. I'm just kind of looking and seeing if we have any questions either from our Zoom or on Facebook. I don't see any particulars. At least this is the first time we're using this Facebook Zoom connection, but it looks like a lot of fun. So I guess there are a few other questions here that I've seen or I've thought about or others have kind of mentioned, and let me just quickly go through them. I kind of jotted them down. And it's kind of going all over the place on this. One is, in Florida, condos must have reserve studies completed. Do you think that a faulty reserve study could have been one of the problems? You may be alluding to it, and I should just kind of put a plug for you. I think that's one of your topics this month on reserve studies. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Reserve studies are required in Florida and in different states, and the reserve study professional, somebody who comes out to the building and looks around, they're not necessarily an engineer, although they could be, but a reserve study for the most part is not a structural inspection. But if the inspector notices a lot of cracks and spalling issues, that should be flagged in the reserve study, and at least with a note to recommend to the condo board to hire an engineer for further evaluation. So I don't think that, I haven't seen the reserve study, but in my opinion, I don't think the contributing factor of the building collapse is due to a faulty reserve study, because the reserve study doesn't really pinpoint major spalling and all that. They may make a note that, there's X amount of dollars needed for spalling repair and budget that in the reserves. But if it's not an emergency situation, I don't think that the reserve study people should be responsible, because you have a different scope of work. A reserve study is different from a full-on structural inspection kind of thing. But my recommendation is all condo buildings should review the reserve study. And if they feel that it's not up to par or they're missing things, then contact the reserve study provider and tell them, I think we should put these in the reserve study. A lot of boards are cognizant of the money issue, so they may not want big ticket items in the reserve study. But is that really reality? No, that's not. And they could be have liability if they do that and change some things that aren't correct.
Okay, thank you. I think I just have one final question. It kind of gets back to maybe what you talked about, but is there any specific building code with respect to building safety or maintaining the building? I think you've touched on it, but and I'm more concerned about Hawaii and local.
Well, because this interview is probably not only national but international, I wanted to kind of talk about the United States Code in general, which actually affects the Hawaii Code as well. So in the building code, there's every state follows the International Building Code, and then each state adopts their own state code, but it's all related. And there's actually a section of the code, the building code, that refers to repairing and maintaining the building. So in other words, the code is not silent on making sure the building is performing as intended. So, and that's why earlier I mentioned that based on the photos that I saw of the Florida building, all the spalling, the local building inspector should have issued a violation notice immediately and saying, hey guys, you better fix your building and fix it now. Here's a notice of violation. I'm giving you 30 days, 45 days, 60, whatever the time period is, to get your building fixed. And in order to do that, you need to hire an engineer. But in this Florida case, there was already an engineer that was hired. So it's just going to be, I know that there's so many questions. There's more questions than answers, actually. But hopefully, by this interview, we're able to answer a bunch of questions, and maybe there's more questions based on what information that I provided. But that's fine. So there is a building code that requires buildings to have good maintenance and repair. So if that code is not followed, then they're in violation already. And I can tell you that buildings that I have inspected, not only in Hawaii, but California, Oregon, Washington, Las Vegas, other areas, I've seen situations where if I was a building inspector, I could issue a violation notice. And that's very important, because I think everybody got too lax. And that's why I'm saying this Florida building collapse, unfortunately, it's very sad, but it's a huge wake-up call for the whole industry to get on board and start looking closely at buildings and your programs and making sure that everything is, taken care of, and we don't have this situation ever happening ever again. And I don't think that it should be not only, happening in the US. I don't want it to happen anywhere in the world. And I know there's third world countries that buildings are falling down all the time, but they don't have the same building code. They don't have the same enforcement and the same financial wherewithal to maintain their buildings. So I understand that, but in as much as possible, we don't want to see this situation happening again, and it shouldn't. It should not happen again, because there should be all these fail-safe programs in place: inspection, repair and maintenance, your engineering, your board taking proactive. And I'm on 3 condo boards myself, and I apologize to the other board members and say, sorry, I'm the one that wants this thing fixed, and we have to fix it. And I don't want the liability. And not say, well, we have to take a vote, we have to decide how we're going to raise the money and all that. I said, no, we got to get it done right away. It's critical. Okay, so at some point, these board members have to really take a stand and say, I'm here, my job, I have a fiduciary duty to protect the property, and I represent and I speak for all the unit owners in the condo association. And I'm doing the right thing, but I get shot down a lot of times because it's a money issue, right? But that's basically what it is. I just want to explain that I may be backtracking, but somebody had asked me, in my opinion, could the accident have been prevented? And my answer is yes. The accident could have been prevented. It should have been prevented. I think that as we go through months and months of investigation, I think in the end, and you can mark my words, I have 41 years of experience in repairing buildings and in construction, that the consensus is that this accident could have been prevented, and how. And then there's going to be the different ways that to explain why things failed, and not only the building components failed, but people who were responsible didn't do their job properly. Okay, so I think, do we have some other questions?
Yes, actually, Lance, since this is the first time we're doing this Zoom Facebook Live, there are several comments and questions. There's a question from one of your longtime good friends here that I recognize, so I want to ask that question at least. And this says, question for Lance, especially in Hawaii, are those buildings going up? I guess, yeah, we're getting plenty along Ala Moana, that's for sure. Have any laws governing that they should have maintenance type of checklists in place, either yearly, quarterly, or monthly? Kind of talking about what you're saying with the programs.
The answer is yes. Okay. In general, when a building is first built, they go through a whole series of building permit checks and review. So the plans are reviewed, and in a high-rise building, you have basically a book of plans, multiple pages. It could be thousands of pages, along with, remember in the old days, the yellow pages, the building specifications could be maybe 5 yellow page type books and the building specs. So you got plans and you got specification. The plans tell you what to build and the specs tell you how to build it. Okay, so, but after the building is finished, the inspectors go and check. You got electrical, you got structural, main building, you have your mechanical, plumbing, air conditioning, and all that. So you got any number of inspections done. Once all that's done and the permit is signed off, the city inspectors don't go to your property anymore. They don't go to the building. So the requirement and the onus is on now the condo association, the property management company, and the building owner is basically the condo association. Okay, so the developers on the hook only, to a certain degree, but once the time period is elapsed, then the condo association takes full control. Now, the condo association is required to, and the board, to maintain the property by inspections, repair and maintenance programs and all that. Now, that's self-governance and self-monitoring program. The city really doesn't knock on your door and say, hey, Mr. Condo owner, did you inspect your building lately? They don't do that. They only do that when they get called from a consumer. Okay. So therein lies the problem. If the building is not monitoring themselves, then, no one's paying attention to these things. So, but if you go back into the building code, I can go to a building and say, hey, there's spalling here. I see pieces of concrete falling down. And I can cite the section in the building code that says you're in violation of the code. Can you read section 116 where it says it's a repair and maintenance and all that? So, but the local building department, and this applies in other cities around the US, they don't have time to do that. They're shorthanded, and that's not what they do. Okay, so there's a loophole there, and that's why the responsible party is the condo board, to make sure that the reserve study is done, your inspections are done, your repair and maintenance is done properly, and everything follows the proper guidelines. So there's a lot of buildings, new buildings that are coming up, and we have to keep these condo associations accountable to making sure that things are being fixed. And I can say today that the construction is not that good, and almost every building coming up, there's construction defects. So just be aware of that. If there's construction defects and now you have a building maintenance problem, I mean, to me, that's a double jeopardy situation. So I'm glad. I'm happy to answer whatever questions that come up. And I know there was no notice that we're doing a Facebook Live, but if people are tuning in, by all means, fire off your questions. I'm here for, how long am I getting paid to be here? I'm here for as long as there's questions. Just go for it.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at the Facebook side right now. I think it's more comments and appreciation for things. They're identifying problems. There's one problem with recreation center in a subdivision. There's the one that you answered. Problem with termites and spalling. Oh, this one looks like there was an inspection done, but no follow-up or something. So yeah, let me read this one. Termites, and this is from one of your Facebook Live viewers. Termites and spalling problems. The county inspector could not come to look at it after they came to inspect, and immediately cleared the repair. So that sounds like a problem.
Is that a condo? Does it?
I'm not sure. It doesn't really.
No, okay.
Termites
Well,
and spalling problems.
if there's questions on Facebook, just read them off.
I'm just it's not questions. It's just comments and maybe questions inside there. But that was what I just read. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think the combination comments and probably in support of what you're saying. Experiences. And let me see if I see any others in here. Like you say, if they're still on and you got any comments, go put them in Facebook Live and we'll pick them up. Oh, it's the one about the termites and spalling was a subdivision. So it says termites and spalling, the county inspector could not come to look at it. And after they came to inspect, they immediately cleared the repairs. So.
Oh, okay.
It was a subdivision, not condo.
Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, I can comment on condos, single family houses, townhouses, any kind of buildings.
Yeah. Well, yeah, good. I mean, I don't see any more questions. I don't see anything on the.
Well, I got something. Apparently somebody figured out that we're on Facebook, and then I got this text.
Oh, okay.
So, okay. hold on, let me look at my phone here. Okay, so here's a question. Are you at liberty to discuss the lawsuits or provide some information on the claims? The answer is no, but let me interject because I'm also expert witness on personal injury and construction defect litigation cases. And basically what I know today is that there's probably 5 or 6 lawsuits that have been filed. And at least one of them, they named the condo board, and I know another one they named the city inspection, and then there was one where they named the uh, original architect and the engineer that did the engineering study. So, like I mentioned earlier, or maybe you just tuned in on Facebook, whenever there's a lawsuit, the attorney who's representing somebody will name in the lawsuit everybody who has anything to do with the property, or um, they think has something to do with the property. And then as time goes on, when they find out that person had nothing to do with it, then they, take their name off. But so why the lawsuit against these people? And then the claim is that and it's the families of the people who had died. And this is normally what happens is the family or their estate of the person that passed away in the accident would sue. And who do they sue? They're blaming the condo board for not taking action to prevent the problem. They're naming the property management company for the same thing, although what you'll see that there were steps taken. Um, they usually name the current condo board and the previous condo board for the past 10 years. So if somebody was on the board 9 years ago and quit or stepped down, their name is still in the lawsuit because they want to know what that person knows and were they guilty of not doing anything. The engineer that did the study, he's named in the lawsuit. The original architect is named. And that's what happens because people say, why did this happen? Somebody was negligent, or a lot of people were, and they just go down the line. The other thing is, I saw a report just yesterday that somebody was saying that it doesn't look, and it could have been another engineer. And whenever things like this are on the news people go and ask people in the industry, engineers and all that. So these people are commenting by looking at news reports or looking at photos. So there was a report from an engineer who looked at a photo and said, oh, for this column, it doesn't seem like they have enough rebar in it, reinforcing steel. So, and it could be true, and we don't know. But you get all these people making comments on different things. And I think, in the end, you'll find out whether they were, valid in their opinion or not. But usually in an older building, somebody can say that. And then also the concrete coverage too. When you have a piece of rebar and you're pouring concrete over it, there's specific building code that says what the coverage is. And in general standard and the building code says 1.5 to 2 inch coverage over the rebar, right? So if by testing, they determined that rebar was sitting only a 1/2 inch to the concrete surface, and because it was so close, that's why the rebar corroded, because concrete is porous, it's not waterproof. So water was getting in, the rebar corroded, it cracked, and then now all of a sudden this column failed. So there's many fingers that are going to be pointed at different people. And it's just going to be interesting what the results come out. But as I said before, my opinion is that this building collapsed because of concrete spalling. Why did the concrete spall? It was due to lack of maintenance and repair. Now, initial study said that the pool had collapsed. Water was flowing down into the parking, and the parking deck started collapsing. The parking deck was attached to the building, and when the parking deck collapsed, the building foundation collapsed, and then the whole building came down like, they call it pancake. And that's probably what happened. I saw the video. I had to watch the video about 10 times because at first I couldn't believe my eyes that this is happening today in the United States. And then my other thought was that this shouldn't even have happened. There was no act of God here. It was human error and negligence. And I'm probably going to get a lot of calls from people, emails after this, basically based on what I'm saying. But I'm just giving my opinion on this thing. And people rely on my opinion because I've been in the industry for so long. And I've even had an email. Someone wanted me to fly up there and meet them in Miami. And I said, no, thanks. I'm not interested in flying right now. But anyway, I thank the people who are on Facebook, and I appreciate this interview. Turn it over to Martin, see if we got any other comments or questions on Facebook.
There's more comments, Lance. I think when you get to your Facebook account, you can maybe do a little bit more personal things. Yeah.
My email's already clogged with reporters and all that from all over the United States. I even had one from London or some BBC or whatever. I don't know. But well, this is a very hot topic, and that's the reason why if people ask me to comment on it, I'm willing to comment because I don't only want to I want to tell the truth, but I don't want to go back and talk about negative things. But I think by this whole venue, I'm able to help people in general and building owners and all that get to where they should be in building safety. That's my main message. My message is building safety first. We don't want any buildings like this to ever happen again. And I understand there's at least, I don't know if you saw the report, but there's at least 2 buildings in Florida that were evacuated because of this problem. And I bet you there's even more. If I were in that area today and I inspected other buildings, I would say, hey, you guys need to move out. You got some major spalling here. You got some major structural problems. And 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if I did that, the people would laugh and go, yeah, whatever. But, we have history now. And I tell my clients, I said, we have spalling here. We need to fix right away. You don't want your building to be like on the news, like the Florida building, oh yeah, well, we're kind of concerned. So there's more attention now and more concern, which is a good thing because we're going to slowly get to where we need to be in the building safety issue. And, I don't know your client who hired you to do this interview, whether they're willing to pay overtime, but I'm willing to stay as long as I need to.
I would love to keep you on if we get the questions. It's more, I guess I'll get back to your Facebook one about that termites and spalling problem. The county inspector would not come to look at it. And I just lost it. It just scrolled away. Somebody else.
Okay. Well, termites have nothing to do with concrete spalling. So if the structure was wood frame and there were ground termites or, dry wood that were there, 10 years or longer, the termites could cause structural damage, structural problems. Now, concrete spalling is not related to termites, but the concrete spalling alone could be a structural problem, and the structural integrity is compromised, especially if the location of that structural member is supporting. So it could be a column or a beam. And, I just thought of something that Florida 40-year recertification inspection program, there's a form, and the structural inspection form is 9 pages long. So that's not like a one cheat sheet that you fill out, check the boxes and all that. So being that the structural inspection form is 9 pages long, and by the way, it also includes electrical too, it tells you that this is important. Because the form is 9 pages, there's things that need to be looked at and checked off. And if you read the 40-year recertification process, there's language in there that has to do with marine environment. And there's one thing which I don't agree with, where if the building has been there for 40 years, then you don't need to go back and look at the plans because you assume that it's standing and everything's okay. But it's not going to apply in this case. And or in any case where a building fails or collapses, they're always going to go and look back. Who built this building? Who was the architect? Who was the structural engineer? Who was the contractor that built the building? Who were all the other people involved? And when the building passed their initial inspections when they were new back in the 80s, who maintained the building from that time till now? And they go back in time, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. Within the past year, I want to see all your inspection reports. I want to see your engineering reports. I want to look at your reserve study. I want to look at your board meeting minutes. I want to see what's going on to get an idea of what's happening. And all that is going to be out there. It's no fun combing through all that, but because federal government is involved, they're gonna want all the information. They're gonna go through it a fine-tooth comb. And there was even a report of attorneys that represented, the owners who said that they were going to file a restraining order or something if they weren't allowed to have their own engineers with boots on the ground, because they were worried about the evidence being taken away, and they wouldn't have their side to document things. So whenever you get to litigation, it's always crazy, and that's just what happens. But I'm fortunate that I'm able to express my opinions in this kind of forum, because I realize that people need to know. And there's, as time goes on, there's going to be way more questions and answers. And that's normally how it is.
Okay, Lance. Well, thank you so much. I think we'll try to wrap them now if it's good. So I want to thank you very much for the information and for sharing your expertise and definitely your experience. It's always educational when I work with you. Do you have any last words before we sign off?
Yeah, my last words are thank you, everybody, for attending or watching Facebook Live. We're going to actually, for the people that missed it, and there's a lot of media that want this information, so we're going to issue the recording when we have it. And once again, tune into our free webinars. We're going to be giving a lot of information on different things. And best of all, it's free. So take advantage of that. Also, the chapter of my book on building safety, that's also free by going to the website and downloading the book. So, people that are on Facebook Live, thanks for tuning in. I know this was last minute. and enjoy your holiday. And I appreciate Expert Media Matters inviting me to give the interview. And thank you, and hope to see you again.
Yeah, same here, Lance.
Aloha.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody. We'll be shutting it down on Facebook and on Zoom. Take care. Stop.